think people need to be willing to start small and be patient. Like, it's not an overnight. It's funny, somebody referred to Montana Knife Company as a 30-year overnight success story. The harder I work, the luckier I get. And the luckier I get, the harder I work.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Defender, founder and CEO here at Mountain Tough, and we are so glad that you are here. It is our goal to bring you inspiring guests every single week, week after week, to help you add some mental tools to your toolbox to overcome adversity and live that abundant and passionate life. We love seeing you dive into this content, and thanks for making us one of the top mindset podcasts in the country. If you are a new or a loyal listener and you have a second, if you could leave us a ranking and a review after listening to this show, those do mean the world to us. And the rankings allow the algorithm to get these episodes out to more people, out to more like-minded people, so that we can transform more lives. There has been a ton going on around Mountain Tough. The lab is buzzing right now for sure. One thing that you definitely want to check out if you are an athlete training for hunting in your 50s, 60s, 70s, we have just released a new program with Randy Newberg that is preseason prep training with Mountain Tough for 50 plus athletes. So if you're 50 or over, this is the program for you. This program came out of necessity. Randy Newberg came to us earlier in 2023 and he said, look, I have the biggest bucket list hunt of all my bucket list hunts coming up this August in the Mackenzie Mountains. It is a gnarly sheep hunt, and I want to be in the best possible physical shape I can be for this trip. It is a trip of a lifetime. It's a hunt that Randy has been planning and saving for since he was a kid, and he wants to go into this hunt feeling as best as possible so that he can thrive. We knew that Randy had a few injuries. We knew that Randy had a few health scenarios to navigate around. So we organized in the lab and we came out with a specific preseason prep training plan for athletes, for hunters, for backcountry hunters that are 50 plus. So if you haven't checked that out yet and you are a 50 plus backcountry hunter, I highly encourage you to take a look at that and apply that to your summer training this year, getting ready for this fall. Transitioning now to today's episode. Today is a phenomenal conversation with a legend in the industry. It is Josh Smith from Montana Knife Company. Josh is doing some amazing things in Frenchtown, building this phenomenal American-made manufacturing company, Montana Knife Company. Most of you have seen them. You've seen the buzz behind MKC. You see what they have accomplished in the last several years. This conversation, we're going to dive into how that all came about. And the mind-blowing thing that a lot of listeners may not know is that Josh had the vision for Montana Knife Company since he was around high school age. So these are not overnight successes that you see. These are journeys that can take a lifetime to build a brand and an enterprise like Montana Knife Company is today. So stand by for my conversation with Josh Smith, founder of Montana Knife Company. Josh, I definitely wanted to talk about your upbringing, and we were just talking downstairs in the locker room before Randy was filming that session, and even that conversation shines some light in my perspective of how you're raising your kids and relating to your kids, and sports and adversity, being around some of your kids. But what does that look like compared to how you grew up?
Yeah, my upbringing, when my folks, I grew up in the excavation world. My parents have a few backhoes and an excavator, a dump truck, and small town, logging town, not like huge like bridge projects, but more work like if you bought a house or you bought a piece of land, you want to build a house, need a little road, need septic system and basement. So I grew up in that, but when we moved to Lincoln, Montana is where I grew up. When I was a baby, they didn't have anything. I mean, they had like one terrible old backhoe and a pickup to pull it around, and had like nothing. When they got married, I think they had $50 and like they got a chest freezer for their wedding from their parents. Like they had nothing.
Yeah.
And they actually immigrated up to Canada for a short time right after I was born. My grandpa was up there logging and ranching, and it was 1981. The interest rates were terrible, like the economy. They couldn't afford to stay, and so they were only there 6 months. And so they knew they wanted to move back to Montana. My dad was from Colorado originally. My mom had family that was from, her mom was from Montana, but they pitched a penny on the map of Montana one night in Canada, and it landed on Ovando, Montana. And so my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle all just decided to like go there. And they drove a couple days down from northern BC, and they showed up to Ovando, Montana at like 11 o'clock at night. Well, there's nothing there.
There's nothing.
Yeah, so they drove down the road 20 miles to Lincoln and plugged their camper in at this little campground deal. And the next night it froze up. Their camper froze and their pipes or whatever broke. And so 2 days later, they bought a house.
Man.
And then like a week later, my uncle bought a house. And so they knew nobody. They had no contacts, no nothing. They had just basically the stuff in the back of their pickup and this old backhoe that they ended up shipping down.
Yep.
And my dad did a little bit of everything in the beginning just to survive. I mean, he was swept chimneys. He was a mechanic, did backhoe stuff, and started growing his company just literally from the ground up. And so I got to be a part of that as I got into like 3 or 4 or 5 years old. I started running backhoes, and like my dad would get me out on the equipment. And by the time I was, 10, I was working on his job sites, like lugging pipe around, and I was working in the ditch.
Yep.
If we were putting in septic systems, and he was running the equipment and doing all that. And then every now and then we'd get a job like in a farmer's field digging like a water line for a half a mile, and he just let me dig where I couldn't hurt anything.
Yeah.
And so by the time I was, freshman in high school, I was doing jobs myself. And we had at that point finally like an employee that would work under me or under him, and I would screen gravel at our pit, and I like had all this responsibility. But I guess the point of it is like I got to see them build a business and be resilient through like real struggle.
Yeah.
And I got to watch them. You look at their business now with 3 backhoes and an excavator and a couple dump trucks and all these gravel pits and stuff, but they built that from nothing. If you just walked in today, you'd be like, oh, they have an excavation company. Like they bought all this stuff. It's like, man, they earned it.
Brick by brick.
Brick by brick. And I've never seen anyone work harder than my dad. Like, you want to talk about discipline. I mean, that's all he did really. Like, he regrets it a little now. Like we didn't go do much fishing, or his knees were too bad to really hunt by the end of work season when things froze up. Like he wasn't going to go hike around the mountains. So
yeah.
My uncle taught me how to hunt, and a couple guys in town. But I think as a kid, I just saw hard work modeled. And, then I started making knives when I was 11. And so I did that through high school as well, when we weren't, like in the wintertime, we weren't doing excavation. That was actually the hard part about growing a business there is my parents couldn't make money from November to April.
That's tough.
So they would borrow, I think it was 20 years they borrowed money to get through the winter before one year they finally had enough savings to get all the way through without borrowing money.
Yeah.
So it took, 35 years to get to the point where they actually had like savings in a pretty good sized business. So in the wintertime, that's really was my knife making time. In the summer, I worked with my dad. But I loved it. He wasn't a yeller. He's super quiet. He rarely ever said, like, good job. It was always like, it's pretty good, but, like, this could be a little better.
Yeah.
It was always the, like, but this could be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I also got to see, you're in a tiny town, so, like, word of mouth is critical, right?
Everything.
And so he was adamant about how we worked, like, how we kept track of our time and only billed the customer if that backhoe was like moving. If you're taking lunch, like, you're not getting paid. If you're on a break, quote unquote, which we didn't take breaks, but if you weren't charging time. And it was like, do the best job for the customer. If you do screw something up, you come back and fix it. So I think a lot of the stuff we do in our company today just comes from, like, even though that's a small town of Lincoln, that's a small community, the hunt community actually is pretty small.
It is small, yeah.
You start to realize, like, everybody kind of knows everybody. And in just the few years we've been in it, I feel like we know a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do something wrong, it's still a small community.
The word's going to get out.
Yeah. So that was my upbringing.
And did you have any siblings?
I had a sister 2 years younger. She worked with us. I was more of the heavier labor stuff. She worked with us more in high school. Like, we started to do a lot of, my dad kind of started a bit of a landscape part of the business that he let her run.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we'd come do site development around a new house. Building's done, everyone walks away, but it still needs, like, topsoil around it and graded, make it look nice. So my sister did a lot of that. She ran the Kubota tractor, and, like, my dad was the kind, he would just give us responsibility and let us kind of fail and just learn. He would set you up where you're not going to, screw something up too bad, but
you're going to learn.
Yeah. He'd be like, I was 8 years old, and he'd be like, grab the backhoe and meet me out at the gravel pit. And I'd drive the backhoe down the highway to the gravel pit,
Yeah.
It was my job at 7, 8 years old to grease the equipment every night he came in. As soon as he came rolling into the yard, my mom was like, get your ass out of the house.
The grease gun.
You see your dad come in, go, does he need help? Go ask him every night. Do you need help? And so I would grease all the equipment, wash the windows on the backhoes. And my mom was pretty adamant too about, like, hey, your dad's worked hard all day. He doesn't need to wash his damn windows. Like,
yeah,
you go wash them, sweep out the backhoe. Like, he adamant about that stuff.
And at that age, like, 8 to 15, you probably didn't realize that was unique, that was a unique upbringing. For you, it was just normal, and you probably enjoyed it.
I really did. I mean, I'll be honest, there were times I was a little resentful because of the nature of our business, we didn't go to the lake. We didn't go fishing. So I would see friends. I had to quit playing baseball at a pretty young age just because, it's summertime, we're working.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely had my times of, like, being jealous of the other kids that they got to do stuff. But my parents were pretty good too of explaining, like, yeah, but your friends don't get to go drive a dump truck and make 20. I mean, my parents paid me well. I mean, making $20 an hour in junior high.
Yeah.
But it was also because my dad valued, like, I was contributing. I was helping them get work done and make money, and he could trust us. So he paid us. I wasn't a slave. By the time I was in high school, I think is when I really started to enjoy it because I got good.
Mm-hmm.
And I started getting, like, my dad to be like, hey, nice work. All right, go bid that job over there and figure that out. But, like, when I got a nice work, it was like, shit, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was really that, like, that's what I did with my dad. I mean, my dad apologizes now. Like, I should have taken you hunting more. I'm like, the reason I can do all my own excavation around our own, like, our MKC building that we built, or the reason my property and my house looks the way it does is because of all the skills I learned as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, I've put in all my own septic systems. I've dug my own basements. I saved myself tens of thousands of dollars.
For sure.
Because of what I learned. So life's a trade-off. I mean, you just can't do everything and be everything,
Yeah. Yeah. You can't forget, like, looking at life in hindsight, looking backwards, how all of those things contributed to who you are now, and everything led to what you're doing now. Without that work ethic and that discipline and that drive and desire, like there's no way you could have created what you've created.
No. Yeah, and it's the same with the knife business. Like those knife makers that started teaching me when I would go to knife shows, there was no internet, there was no YouTube. So like you had to go to a shop or you had to go to a knife show to sell your knives or to meet other makers. And if you saw like, hey, how did you do that? You had to go ask that guy. And then like, it also taught you as a kid how to communicate with adults, and not be afraid to ask questions or try stuff. But there again, those guys never complimented me. I mean, they were assholes. they, you know, I just could never get a compliment out of them. And I was always trying to make a knife to match their level. But what I didn't know at the time is they weren't very good knife makers initially at that time either. Mm-hmm. But I just happened to get really lucky that I got involved with what were going to be someday world-class knife makers. So the whole time I'm trying to catch them, they're getting better.
Yeah.
And I just could never catch them until literally I was in my 20s and I was at the Atlanta Blade Show and I was showing knives like we'd do in the hotel room, we're all sitting around like, oh, what'd you bring? It's always a really cool time. Mm-hmm. Pull out the knives on the bed and like I was passing around what I made and like several of the legends were like, damn.
That's cool.
And that was like a big deal.
That's a big moment.
But I remember wanting to quit. I remember a couple times when I was in like junior high crying to my parents, like, you know, I'm never going to be as good as them. Like what, you know, just being a little bitch, you know?
Yeah.
But just feeling like I could never get a compliment, but they were doing me a favor. If they had kept saying like,
that's good when it's not.
Yeah. Then I wouldn't have like, had that strive to like get there, you know, to get better.
Mm-hmm. How did it start originally though? At 11, did it just kind of catch your eye? And was it like a neighbor or a family friend? And you're like, this is something I want to get into.
Yeah, my little league baseball coach, he was a hunting guide in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and he was a rancher, logger. There again, kind of one of those guys that just was doing anything in a small town to survive. Mm-hmm. But he was making hunting knives, and he'd bring them to practice and show like the dads. And of course, I'm 11, and at that age, I think all 11-year-old boys love knives and guns. So, yeah. But something, I don't know what it was about me, like something about me. I was constantly asking questions, and I think I was talking to my parents about it, and they bought me one of his knives for Christmas that year. And then right after that, he invited me up to a shop to make one. So I went up, I made a knife with him, and he was really pretty gruff, like basically don't screw up, don't screw around in here, like serious business. And I made a couple knives in his shop, and I think it was his way of getting rid of me, was like, well, if you want to be a knife maker, you got to have your own knife shop. So what I also had at the same time was a lawn mowing business. Mm-hmm. And so between my parents' business and my mowing business, like my mom would hook onto I had a little trailer. I started with a push mower, and then I bought a rider, which was like a Sears rider. It was badass.
Big time, yeah.
Yeah. What would today just be a total pile of garbage. But she would haul me downtown, no cell phones or anything. So she'd haul me downtown, and I would just drive around on my mower on my little route and mow lawns like on Wednesday and Thursday, and just mow a ton of lawns. And then I'd call her from like the last customer's house, and she'd come pick me up.
Oh, man.
So when Rick was like, you got to have your own shop, I took some of my lawn mowing money and bought a belt grinder. Again, kind of a junky one at the time, but I set that up in my dad's workshop. And probably after a year, I was making a real mess in his shop, and he was like, you need your own shop. So we had a lean-to, like equipment shed, and we had our own little sawmill. So like, you know, we had a lot of pine trees on our property, and they'd die or blow over or whatever. And so we cut all our own lumber, and with our lumber that we cut, we framed it in. It was 10 by 10, small. And we cut these big, huge slabs of pine, and he built the benches at the height he thought I would be someday. So I had to stand on a milk crate for like 4 years in that shop.
Just grinding.
Yeah. And there's a picture of me in Blade magazine when I'm like 13, 12, standing on a milk crate in my coveralls, grinding knives.
Man, that's awesome.
And I started buying more equipment, and I started going to knife shows, and then by the time I graduated high school, I had like a legit knife shop. I mean, full on knife shop.
Man.
You know?
And then you were also pursuing being a journeyman at that time in that middle school, high school time frame?
Middle school. I became a journeyman knife maker when I was 15. And then I did my master smith test when I was 19. So I was working pretty diligently, like before school and after school. I think it's very similar to how I grew MKC 40 years later. But like, you know, everybody says they want to, you know, chase their dream, quit their job and chase their dream. And it's like, no, you need to chase your dream and work your job.
Yeah.
It's like I had to go to school and I didn't know it was training me for being disciplined later. But like, well, if you want to make knives, you're going to find the time. Like I'm in basketball, I'm in football, you know, track. So still have to work with my dad, do all that. So you have to find the time, which that usually is like 5 a.m., you know, or late at night, weekends.
And did the becoming a master and a journeyman at your age, were you one of the youngest of all time to do that at that level?
Yeah, at both of those, 15 and 19, I was the youngest. I don't know that it's been beat yet. Not that it matters. I hope some kid does beat it.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, there's a testing process you got to go through, and you got to be a member of the American Bladesmith Society, and it just takes so much. Like you have to present your knives to a panel of judges in Atlanta, mastersmiths, and they judge the fit and finish and all that. But you also have to make a test blade, like a performance blade. You know, it's one thing to make pretty knives, but like, do they actually work? I mean, their first job is to be a tool. So the first part of the test is to make a performance blade, and that blade has to chop a 1-inch rope in half in one chop, which just shows sharpness. But then it has to chop 2 2x4s in half and still shave. And then it has to bend 90 degrees in a vise without breaking. So that shows that you actually have a real knowledge of metallurgy and heat treating. Yeah. And if you don't do that just right, that blade, the edge will either deform, which means it's soft, or it'll chip out, or the blade will snap, which means it's too hard. So you're trying to find that real functional middle ground.
That's super interesting, especially that 90 degree bend one, showing like the durability of an actual working blade.
Yep.
And before you graduated high school, were you selling those knives to customers?
Yeah, I mean, by the time I graduated high school, I mean, when I was 15, I probably had a 3-year backlog. It actually became really stressful, and I got kind of some good advice from those guys I was learning from, which was like, you don't have a house payment. You get stuck making the same knife because of orders. You're not going to progress as a maker. And several times in my life, I had to kind of like wipe the list away and just be like, I'll just be stuck doing the same thing. I wanted to, every knife I made, still kind of this way on my custom stuff, but like, I want to try something I haven't done before.
Progress.
Yeah. And, man, you go take 200 knife orders of the same knife. You know, it's going to take you months, especially as a kid, like it's going to take you a couple of years. You're going to make the same knife in 3 years. Well, why? It's one thing if you have to feed your family. That's a situation later in life I had to figure out how to balance.
Yep.
Like maybe I'll make 5 of those, but then I'm going to make sure I make one somewhere in the middle that pushes me.
Yep.
So yeah, I like Paul Harvey. I don't know if you remember Paul Harvey.
Yeah.
Like I was on Paul Harvey when I was 14.
Oh, his voice is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He talked about me, and then the magazines covered me a ton. The knife magazines, they were super kind to me. And then going to shows, I went to New York City every year through high school, Atlanta, Oregon, Boston. I went to several shows, you know, and it's kind of cool looking back on it. Like there was a master in South Carolina that I'd never met before. No, maybe I met him at one show. That's how it kind of worked out. But my folks put me on a plane on a standby ticket when I was 14, and I flew from Montana to South Carolina. Took like 20 hours getting bumped on flights, no cell phone coverage. But I flew out there and stayed with him for a week and learned like knives from him for a week. And my folks had never met him. I just told them about him from the shows. He was an old gray-haired man, super nice guy.
They just flew you out, or you just flew out there alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And stayed with them for a week and then flew standby back. And, you know, I got in the car to go to like the Eugene, Oregon knife show when I was 13, and Rick and those guys, we got to the pavement and Rick turns around. He's the guy that taught me to make knives, Dunkerley. And, he turned around and was like, anything you hear in this car stays in this car. He's like, your parents think I'm respectable. Because, like, you figured a couple 30-year-old knife makers going to a knife show in a old Cadillac. It was rude and crude.
Yeah.
And I was there. They called me Psycho Knife Boy. So, PKB. And they'd be like, PKB, go get us some pops. And they would give me, like, $20 in change. And I'd have to go to the pop machine and make, like, trips. And I'd bring... They weren't big drinkers, but I was just, like, the errand boy. Yeah. So that's the thing. Being the kid, I always wanted to be like on their level and be one of the guys. So it got frustrating, like especially once I got into high school, you start to get a little ego. And I was also getting pretty good as a knife maker. Mm-hmm. But you're still just the kid.
Did they call you Psycho Knife Boy because you were young and so passionate about knives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It was funny. I still have my license plate when I was 15 was PKB on my car. I still have it hanging in my Ford shop.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second and talk to you about nutrition and supplementation. There are a plethora of options when it comes to supplements that can be kind of overwhelming, so I wanted to let you guys know what I do take. So in the mornings, I am taking the Mountain Ops greens and the collagen right when I wake up. And that has been a game changer. I don't eat a lot of vegetables throughout the day, so adding those greens in the morning is quick and efficient, and I can really feel the collagen. In addition, I do enhance my workouts. My Mountain Tough training sessions are quite difficult, and so I do like to take the Enduro. It gives you a cardio enhancement that you can actually feel. And then I also like a little caffeine with my workout, so I'm taking the Mountain Ops Ignite. Lastly, it's really important that you are getting enough protein and recovering after these difficult sessions. What I do know is even following a strict whole foods diet, I'm not getting nearly enough protein on most days unless I take a supplement. So I do take the Mountain Ops protein after my workout to make sure that I'm hitting about 1 gram per body weight for a functional athlete. So taking the Mountain Ops protein with some creatine after my workouts has been huge. Those are the products I am taking and that I recommend. The Mountain Ops team is giving Mountain Tough podcast show listeners an exclusive discount to their products. It is a great deal. So for a first-time purchase on mountainops.com, you do get 20% off. All you need to do is go to mountainops.com and then use the code MountainTough at checkout. That's MTNTOUGH, all caps, all one word. Apply that as your promo code at checkout, and you're going to get 20% off your first order. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. I think there's a ton to unpack in that first kind of like foundational story of your upbringing, especially from a mindset perspective as a father. I think the kind of the $1 million question is in that story to be unpacked, because what made you who you are, which eventually led to Montanan Knife Company, but what allowed that and enabled that to happen was your parents not having anything and them building brick by brick because they had to survive, eventually created who you are and your skills and your discipline and your work ethic. And it was a different time and a different generation. So like having less technology distractions and more time to be bored and creative generates a lot of these artistic masterpieces, and it gives you the time, because you're bored, to work on a craft like knife making. Mm-hmm. So I think The $1 million question is, how do you pass that down to the next generation, which is extremely difficult because you have way more resources than your parents did as you're raising your kids.
Right.
So how have you been working on that side of your life?
It's a challenge because like my dad wasn't the hard yeller driver type. He was just the like show you. My mom was more of the hard driver, like make you feel guilty if you're still in bed at 7 a.m. when your dad's been out Saturday morning since 5.
Mm-hmm.
She was more of the driver. He was just the example guy. And like something about him, and I don't know if it's it was my personality of wanting to like make him proud or whatever. But like something about him made you want to like not let him down. And now, and it is unfortunate, everybody kind of craps on social media these days and for good reason for a lot of it, for half of it. But then for the other half of it, it's the most powerful free marketing tool that like I'd have died to have back then.
For sure.
Like I had to hope that someone was going to put me in a magazine, hope that a writer would call and want to cover you. Or you had to buy an ad in a magazine. Now with a photo and one Instagram post, you can reach tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, so there's good and bad today with it. But that downtime, that free time was, you had to fill it with something. But with my kids, I've also struggled to like, just because I'm the youngest master in the world and I'm the knife maker and whatever, like I didn't ever force my kids to like be knife makers.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted them to choose their own path. But I hoped by also modeling hard work, showing resilience, like, my house burned down. I was living in a camper. I mean, this is back in 16, 17, like at my lowest point, broke as hell.
Man.
And they were old enough to remember that, like still today, but then to see us build back, quit a job, start a company. I'm just hoping that by them watching all of this, that when they're 25, 30, 35, like they have the same passion. They're pushing whatever their dream is. Like people ask me, like, do your kids want to be involved in the company? And it's like, my older daughter seems to want to be more into like teaching. Mm-hmm. My daughter that's a senior right now wants to be a vet. She's super motivated. She goes with a veterinarian a lot now. Like it's a large animal vet. So she'll respond to farms and ranches for like a horse with, cut or, just in the like 9:30 at night, the other night, the vet texted her, said, hey, can you help with the surgery? And they went and helped on a collared horse and opened that horse up, head to tail, took all the guts out of it, ended up dying. But like my daughter was there till 1 a.m. and had school the next day. I love that because that's her passion.
Yep.
And that's one thing, like I'm writing a speech right now for I'm the keynote speaker at the Drummond High School graduation in a few weeks. And the piece of it that people need to figure out in life is what their passion is. Like I was passionate about knives. I was passionate about hunting. I was passionate about, I loved going out and working with my dad. But I sucked in school. I got bad grades, C's and D's and, B, just good enough grades to keep my parents kind of off my ass most of the time. Mm-hmm. Usually like by the end of the quarter coming, I'm like, I'm about to get my ass beat. Got to make it through the storm. But I was a good kid. Yeah. I wasn't a bad kid, but like I didn't see the point in school, and I was going to be a knife maker and run an excavation company. What do I need math for? Mm-hmm. And it was the wrong attitude, but I didn't have passion for it. And even today, as I sit here, I'm super disciplined in one way, but then I'm like really out of shape right now and trying to get back in shape. But like, I got to find my passion for that.
Yeah.
You're not going to be very successful at anything if you don't find the passion. And that to me is where discipline comes in, is how do you still work hard at something when you don't necessarily love it? That to me is the discipline part. Mm-hmm. The passion's easy. It's easy to work hard at something you love.
Yeah.
To me, that's not discipline. That's passion. That's fun. Yeah. Even if it's hard work, you're enjoying it. How do you be successful at something? And that's where I tell people, like, that's your day job. Like your passion might be building bows at night, but you might be an accountant during the day.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? How are you the best accountant in town, even though you hate it? Well, that's discipline, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, with my kids, you know, my boy Hank, he seems to be like, he loves to hunt, but right now, you know, he wants to be in the NFL and the NBA and sports. And he's, you know, very athletic, but, there will probably be a cap on his career at some point.
At a young age, did you have them integrated just with doing small projects in the business and at the company?
Yeah, for sure. Like my daughter at the time was 14. Now she's 18, but like she was helping grind all my handles. I mean, it was a funny story. I came home from my lineman job one day and my wife was like, "You're gonna be so proud of Sadie. She ground like 38 handles today." And we were hand grinding the first 200 knives that I did. Like I knew nothing about production. So we're hand grinding these and I was like, wow. And Sadie was helping. I went out to my shop and I started inspecting them all and they're all ground with like this angle. They were all like, I had to regrind them all that night.
Oh my God.
You know, but of course I appreciated her being involved and she's a kid, but they were very, Hank was helping him put knives together. He was 12. Macy was 10. She was putting knives together. I have photos and videos of them bead blasting. Like they were all much more involved then really than they even are now, just because now they have their lives with sports and they're really good at school and super proud of them. But what I'm hoping is, and I see it like with Sadie got a full ride for basketball. She won state last year in shot put and she was all state in basketball this year. And Hank, my freshman, even though he's big, I always hate it when people are like, "Oh, you're only." He hates it too. Like you're only good because you're big. I'm like, well, you could also be a big piece of shit.
Yeah, for sure.
But instead, he does not miss a day in the gym. He is up every single morning and goes to the gym by himself and does a basketball workout. He's doing weights. He's usually in the gym morning and night. He came over on the court Easter night and on my basketball court from my ex-wife's and just did a workout on the court for an hour and a half. Like that kid is disciplined. So my point is who knows if they'll be involved in the company someday.
Yeah.
I don't care. I mean, yes, it would be really neat someday if there was a Smith kid involved in at the top, you know, down the road. But for now, I just want them to find their passion and like also I don't want to just step into MKC because it's there and it's the easy button.
It could be an easy button for
I'd
sure.
love to see him go fail.
Yeah.
Like go fail. Or go experience life and struggle. And maybe someday it'll be an easy button that they can hit, but then they'll actually maybe have also appreciation for it. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily an easy button. Like they all know if they're going to come work for here, they have to start from the ground up. They're not just going to get installed somewhere, but you know, I think you get the point. Like, I love the idea that they're not just all like, oh, I'm going to work in my dad's company because it's right in the backyard.
Yeah, and hopefully they absorb some of that risk-taking that you've shown by example. Mm-hmm. So regardless of what they choose and where their passions land, I think that example you've shown them of, you know, take some risks, and it's not always going to work out, but, you know, favors the bold, and eventually if the passions and the timing and the risk create that perfect storm, it can really turn into something great. And so even if they wind up in a completely different profession, because that's where they're gifted and that's where their interests are, that is awesome. But through their upbringing with you, seeing the work ethic and discipline and risk-taking, I think absorbing those attributes could be one of the most important things.
I hope so. And I hope they also have seen that, like, I mean, I turned 43 yesterday. Like, it's not an overnight success story. Mm-hmm. I've preached to them probably more times than they ever want to hear. I call it kind of my grain of sand theory. I tell them if you go out in the driveway and you pick up a grain of sand and you drop it in a 5-gallon bucket and you do that for the entire day, it's not going to matter. Like if you do it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a day, 2 days, you're not going to notice. You do it for a month, you might start to notice maybe. You do it for a year, you're going to start to notice. And one day you're going to drop a grain of sand in the bucket and it's going to fall out on the ground. And you're going to realize, that what consistency and time and not giving up did for you.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, like, I passed my Master Smith test when I was 19, Journeyman when I was 15, but I didn't start MKC until I was 39. I registered the name Montanan Knife Company when I was 19. I didn't start it till I was 39. But I've made knives and I've made moves and I've done things and I've talked about this more than my friends probably. I'm sure my friends that were around me during those years thought I was full of shit because, I'd never start this.
Talked about it for a long time.
But man, I had a vision of like, this is what's happening today is exactly what I envisioned. Now I can't say that I thought it would also happen this fast. And like, I didn't envision like a lot of the success, like to go that fast. But like, I thought eventually we would build a big company that, I just wanted to build a big respected company
in Montana.
Yeah. And, the point is I tell that with my kid with working out and I'm, maybe not the one to be preaching it, but, if if he goes to the gym this morning and lift weights, it's not going to matter. It's not going to change. Like he's not going to be different tomorrow. If he lifts weights tomorrow, if he lifts weights all next week, he's still not going to, he's going to walk out on the basketball floor. He's not going to see or feel a difference.
Yep.
It's not going to matter per se. You do that every day for 3 months, you might start to notice just a little bit. You do it every day for 6 months, and a year later, basketball season starts, and you walk out on the floor, and for some reason, you're different than everybody else. Like you're better than you've put some gap between your friends and yourself, and they're like, "Oh, you're just good because you're big." And it's like,
it's the time.
Yeah. Now you stack grains of sand for a year, that matters. For a week. And then you stop, like that doesn't matter, or you skip a big section of time. And so I think that's where my boy right now, I'm super proud of him with that because he does not miss. In fact, he usually, puts 2 grains of sand in a day. It's weights in the morning and it's his own basketball workout at night.
That's awesome.
But there's a reason. It's like when you're all conference as a freshman, it's not because he's tall. There's other tall kids in his class. It's because he worked,
Yeah.
But then, it's also I reminded him, he got his all conference selection and I was like, well, you weren't all state. You got some work to do, bud. Like
there's always ways to improve.
Yeah. Next year, be all state, So just let that drive you,
What happened for you the years between graduating high school and starting MKC?
Yeah, I said I'd never get married till I was probably 30. I went to college initially. I don't know who allowed me. Like probably I don't know what my parents were doing, but like I was terrible in math in high school. I had no interest in it, and then they allowed me to say that I was going to go into construction engineering in Bozeman in college. It's like, wait, I don't know what teacher didn't grab me and be like, bro, you're not going to be an engineer.
Math's important.
Yeah. But I thought somehow that was going to relate. Like my plan graduating high school was to take over my parents' excavation business and then make knives like as a side gig. And so I thought maybe an engineering degree, I could build their business more or something. But I mean, I really quickly, when I got here to Bozeman, started not doing well in grades. And also I just wasn't, again, I didn't have the passion for it. And then duck hunting season started. And I mean, all this area out where we're at now, there was nothing out here. So like we goose hunted all these fields all the time.
Oh yeah. All these ponds.
Yeah. I didn't do well my freshman year at all. And I think I came back maybe my sophomore year for a semester and didn't do well. And so I moved back home, entered business school in, Great Falls and drove from Lincoln every day. But as soon as the weather got nice and my dad was like, well, I can go make $25 an hour run an excavator. I can drive to Great Falls and go to an accounting class. Like
Going to work.
yeah. So I didn't finish that. But that summer I did meet somebody and I ended up getting married. So I was super young. Like I think by the time we got married, I was 21 maybe. So when we got married, we moved into Missoula away from Lincoln, and I got an excavation job with just a random guy in town knocking on doors. And she was a school teacher. And so as soon as we closed on our first home that fall, like the day we closed, I quit my job and went full-time making knives.
Okay.
And at that point, I was the youngest master, and I was really had become somebody in the knife industry, and I had to try it. Even though all the old guys were like, don't do this as a living.
You're like, I got to test it.
Yeah, it's that I was making one knife at a time, and they're very high-end, $2,000 or $3,000 knives, art piece type knives, and it's that struggling artist thing where it's like, it's an expensive knife, but also you can be halfway through one and screw it up. There's no paid vacation. There's no benefits. Like if I wasn't in my shop working, I felt guilty.
Losing out.
Yeah. If I went and tried to sit in a tree stand, a deer hunt, I'd just sit there and think like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I should be in my shop. So I made knives full time from that point till, 2010. So like in 2008-9, when the economy started going downhill, I was teaching a guy to make knives in my shop, and he worked for the power company as a welder. He had paid vacation, 401k, and 8 to 4:30 and making $40 an hour. And I was just like no worries. Like he's going to get up morning, go to work. His job's there. Doesn't even matter how it goes. He's going to go home at 4:30. No worries. And I had a fair amount of stress, 4 young kids at that point now. And if you watch the news at that time, like we were headed into a depression. Like, oh, the world's going to be in a depression and all this. And the first thing that people cut out of their budget are $5,000 knives.
For sure.
And I had done some cool stuff. I made a sword for a sheikh in the Middle East. He flew me to London. He flew me to Istanbul, Turkey. He flew me to Abu Dhabi to deliver it.
Dang.
It was $40,000 sword.
That's cool.
Like I did some really neat stuff, but man, I had 4 young kids at home and just like not getting ahead, paycheck to paycheck kind of deal, knife to knife. And grass was greener on the other side of the fence. And so, I think I made the decision for the right reasons of what I had at the moment, but I decided to apply for a job they had actually, operating backhoe for them. So I fell back on my old
excavation.
Life. Got a job, and the idea was be an excavator or be a operator for them, and then get a welding apprenticeship. I bought a welder. I started practicing pipeline welding in my own time, and real quickly there, I saw all the gray hair in the room were on the electric side, the linemen, and so a kid there got an apprenticeship, and I jumped over to that side and got a groundman job, which is just a grunt, and then the next fall I got an apprenticeship. And so I did a 3.5-year apprenticeship to become a journeyman lineman.
Okay.
And I mean, I love that job. I mean, you're hiking through the mountains, you're looking, tree in the line, like, hey, we just lost power in St. Regis.
Yeah.
Hour and a half from here. Drive to St. Regis and try to figure it out. Town's out of power. We'd work the storms, like the worst weather you're working.
Yeah.
A lot of that was a brotherhood. It's a lot like the military, even though I've never been in the military. Just, if you and I are working together, like our lives depend on each other. Like if you do something stupid, you could kill me.
Yeah. And it's physical.
You tell me a wire is dead and I grab it, it better be dead. Like you better know what you're talking about. And also it's very physical. Very, very physical. That's when I was in good shape. Climbing poles.
Yeah.
A lot of climbing poles and a lot of fixing structures, like power pole structures up in the middle of the mountains with you can't get equipment to it. It's all ropes and hoists, and you're in a pair of hooks on a pole with a belt around the pole all day.
Yeah.
And you're lugging a 450 pound steel arm up the pole and bolting it on and climbing 100-year-old poles and sketchy shit. But it was super cool. I mean, I learned a ton. I just hated the corporate office part of it, safety meetings and
yeah.
FBS. So we'd be in the bucket truck and I'd be telling my foreman, buddy of mine there, Dave, that was, we'd be up in there and I'd be talking about like, I want to start this knife company. I registered the name and we would talk. He was a huge hunter. So we would talk about Montana Knife Company all the time. And I'm sure he was just like,
just sick of hearing
yeah,
it.
shut up. But like over the years, well, and when I was an apprentice, I got divorced. And then a year later, my house burned down. I don't think she burned it down, but, you know, so I'm an apprentice, 4 kids, living in a camper in my driveway. At work, when you're an apprentice, you're lower than whale shit. I mean, just be quiet, do your job. They don't care if your house burned down. Like, go to work and do your thing. So, like, I was dealing with my house at night. I ended up building my own house, kind of back, generaled it all, and did all my own excavation. But again, that was early mornings and late nights. So single dad and just trying to get through. There's a lot of book work with an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And just frankly, it felt like you're just running from a wildfire and you're just putting yourself out all the time.
Just grinding.
Yeah. And didn't hunt a lot. You know, just if I had some free time, I'd try and make a knife in my shop. But yeah. So once I actually met my new wife, at this point I was a journeyman lineman, and I kind of made a decision like, I'm going to go for this Montana knife thing at some point. And I was telling Jess in 2018 when we got married, I was telling her about my dream of what I want to do. And she was like, well, you should quit your job and do it. And I was like, well, slow down. But she was more of like, she told me, I still remember the conversation. She's like, I have the kids, I got the house. Like, when you come home from work, go to your shop.
Support.
Yep. So in the morning and at night. And her dad passed away that year. And we inherited like, I think it was like 20 grand. And we took all that money and bought steel to start MKC.
Dang.
And that was her way of supporting. She's like, well, because I didn't really have the money to do it. So, you know, we didn't have the savings, especially with like new house and everything. Like I said, I was still really like financially in a shitter.
Yeah.
So we took that money and bought steel, and I just started to try to figure out, and I had produced, you know, $5,000 knives one at a time. So initially made 200. I had no idea how to scale and do, and those first 200 I learned like, I'm not doing this right. It's way too slow. So every time I did a run of like 200 or so, I'd learn something, and, you know, it just, I refused to borrow money. You know, we took that money and I was like, if I can't make it go with this, I hadn't quit my job yet, but even when I did, I'm not going to borrow money. I already put my family at risk quitting.
Yeah.
A good job.
Yep.
So.
Is there a Winter Strong story in there too? I remember talking to Bert about kind of sitting around that campfire, kind of kick things into gear also.
That was, yeah. So in 2019 is when, you know, we bought that steel. I cut those prototypes and I started making them just in my shop. And I got an invitation from Neil Kamimura to come demonstrate knife making at Winter Strong. I didn't know anything about Winter Strong or Burt or any of that. That was February of 2020. And so went out there, demonstrated, and I brought some prototype Blackfoot knives. And I was showing them around, and everybody there was just incredibly supportive. And that's fine. That's all fine and dandy, the support thing. But what the difference in that was the caliber of people and the stories around there of everyone's like success story of like, and all of it had to do with like hard work. There's Olympians there. There's athletes. There's business owners, you know, and then there's people on the hunting side. And like, it was the first time I had been around so many accomplished people, and they were no egos, and all of the support was coming. Like, I could have had support from like people in my town I lived in, but the support was coming from people who had like done something. Yeah. And it was so motivating. And I was hesitating still. When I went out there, I was still like kind of making some prototypes, still making my job. Like, I hadn't committed. And when we flew home from that, like, going through the airport and talking all the way home, it was like, I am going. Like,
that's awesome.
Like we came out of there with so much motivation of like, we got these people behind us, like we can do anything. It really was amazing. Now, also flying home from that event was when COVID started to become like a thing. It was the first weekend in February. By mid-February, COVID was
kicking off.
Yep. And so we kind of talked about it in like that February, March timeframe. The last time we had like a big national, the world's ending event, I quit making knives, in 2010. And we made a conscious decision like right away in that March timeframe to just not watch the news. Just ignore it.
Yeah.
Like, just do what we do, control what we can. And so I met Brandon, my business partner, through a Sornex contact, hired him to come take some photos in spring of 20. In July of 20, he launched our website, and I still have screenshots on my phone. It was the morning of the first TAC I'd ever gone to in Big Sky. And I went down there. I didn't know anybody. I just had heard about them. And so I was like, well, I'm going to drive down there, try and meet some people in the industry, maybe give a few knives out. Dudley was going to be there. I was going to give a knife to Dudley and just try to make some contacts. And so that morning we were driving to the hill. I have the screenshots on my phone. It was like 6 a.m. Brandon texted and said, your website's live. And so we went up on the mountain, and it's kind of cool because like we went up to shoot, rode the chairlift up, and we walked up on this group, and it was kind of backed up. And they were like, oh, you should just shoot with us. And I was like, I don't want to bother you. And a couple of the people in that group were super kind. And they're like, no, just shoot with us. Well, it was Donnie Drake, Jessica Byers, who now works for me.
Yeah.
And we shot with them all day, and they were just like super kind. And then down at base camp, I met Big Chino Outfitters and met Isaac Ailman and John Dudley and Cole Kramer and people like that. And little did I know, a couple years later, like I'd be super close with all of them. But that community just like welcomed us. And so I kept my lineman job all the way through the end of that year. I quit December 31st that year.
Of 20.
Yep.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages. And I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs or your kettlebell diesel. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Again, that's turtleboxaudio.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. It's insane how fast you guys have grown since then, only being 3 years.
Yeah.
So you went from yourself in 19 and 20, kind of a full launch in 20.
Yep.
And how big is the company now in employee size?
Yeah, so spring of 21, we hired our first employee kind of part-time. Tristan, he was a high school kid. He was still in high school. He'd come out after school or on the weekend. He now manages like 40 people downstairs in our shop.
It's insane.
We have 56 employees.
56 in less than 3 years. That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And we bootstrapped it. I mean, we just kept, some people were frustrated or still are that like, why don't you make more knives? Why don't you cut more? It's like, well, we only had so much money. So like I would spend all my money on the materials that I could afford. We'd make those knives. Once we sold them, we'd take the profits and buy more. And it kind of, we would buy what we thought was going to be enough, because those knives, to get it through the process takes about 6 months. And so you're looking out 6 months trying to project where your company's going to be. And it's like, well, let's make 500 knives. Like that'll be enough by then. And by the time we would drop those knives, they'd be gone like faster. So then I got to the point where it's like, well, let's make 700 and 1,000. And, now, this year, I think we'll make somewhere around 160,000 knives.
Jeez, that's wild. That's awesome. And when you first hired Brandon, you didn't necessarily hire him out of the gate to be a business partner? Did you hire him out of the gate just to help with some marketing?
Yeah, I hired him just to take some photos, frankly. I needed a website, but I didn't have any content.
Yeah.
And so he was a good photographer. But then I was explaining to him kind of my vision and he's like, well, I can build you a website. And so I was like, all right. Well, I would explain how I wanted the feel to be. And like the next day he'd send me like a web page and I'd be like, damn,
it's perfect.
It's perfect. Like he saw the vision from the start. And then I was paying him through 2020 to do that stuff. And I told my wife, probably in August of 20, like we can't afford to pay him. But like we need a sales and a marketing person. And so I offered him a partnership in it and pretty significant partnership, like not like 5%, like, 40%. And, cause I wanted him all in. Like I wanted him to realize like if he puts the work in that I put in and we do it together, like we'll both do well. I wanted like real ownership out of him. And that's the thing about waiting to start the company so long. Like I think when I was in my early 20s, ego wise, like I'm master bladesmith and blah, blah, blah. And like, I would have probably tried to do everything and also I would have been worried probably about my reputation, my name. So like not allowed someone else to be involved in that. And like, what if they mess up or whatever? But like, I knew at the stage I was at when I started this, that like I had to delegate. If this was going to grow to what I had envisioned, which is, a knife company of a few hundred employees, like you're going to have to delegate at some point. So you might as well right from the start. And you can make the greatest thing in the world. If you can't sell it, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of that was just blind faith. I just got totally lucky that I met him. And then like, he just told me on I just did a podcast episode with him. We'd never done one. He told me on my podcast, when I quit my job, December 31st of 20, he thought I was insane because he had a side gig going. He was working for Flegner Fail as their marketing person, but he had a side gig starting his own marketing firm kind of business. And he actually quit his job like in September before I did, but it was to run his marketing firm.
His side business.
Yeah. And I think the Montanan knife thing was like, yeah, I'll be your business partner and do some stuff. And then it started growing. And then like the next year he had to start offing clients. And then finally to the point where he offed everything and just was MKC. But he's like, dude, when you quit your job, I think you're nuts.
Man, as like an entrepreneur, your story is pretty insane, especially from the perspective of like you had that idea and that vision for so long, but you really would have, it seems like it would have almost been impossible to start it 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the timing had to be there for it to finally start and get going, even though the vision had been there for a long time, which you held on to that vision like much longer than most. A lot of people have have the vision and go for it before really the market is kind of ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
But like with MKC pre-social media would have been probably a different story.
It would have probably, like, I've never had MKC, like, never gone to a knife show with MKC. Like, I went after the hunting market.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. Like, what I started seeing happening in the 2010 timeframe or so was like replaceable blade knives and so much stuff, like more and more knife companies taking production overseas. And knives and guns are something that's really all that men pass down. Like, you know, you might pass down a watch or a car or something, but like now all of a sudden we're throwing something away that we always pass down. And I sharpened those knives for 30 years. You know, you might walk into my shop. It didn't matter what the knife was. It mattered who carried it. And you'd be like, my grandfather passed away years ago, but like this was the knife he carried in Vietnam or, you know, whatever the story was. And I'd sharpen it. And that's what you're left with of like memories. And it's also one of the few things you can pass down and still carry. Like you could carry your grandfather's pocket knife if you wanted to.
Yeah.
You know? So I was seeing outsourcing to China. I was seeing knives just getting thrown away. And then what really struck, and I had no idea this in 20, but like COVID then all of a sudden turned, I think, a lot of the population of America focusing more on, like, if you remember the nightmare of all of the like shipping stuff from China and sourcing things. And I think the U.S. became really desirous for American-made products again. We started seeing how fragile our economy is when you concentrate and you depend on Vietnam and China to source your stuff. And I also think our country is hungry to support people who want to take risk and like chase the American dream. This whole idea of the American dream is dead. Like, it's, you know, the world's unfair. Like, the world's never been fair for people who don't have anything. Like, the world wasn't fair for my parents when they had $50 in a chest freezer. Mm-hmm. You know, like it took them 30 years to build their excavation business. That's the American dream. They chased it. They did it. It was through hard work. Nobody gave it to them. It's not going to be easy. But I think our world right now wants to celebrate people who take risk, you know. And the risk thing is kind of funny. Like, one, I was a lineman, so if I would have failed, that's why I was so adverse to debt. Like, I can go broke, but if I don't get in such bad debt, like, I can always go become a lineman again. Mm-hmm. I can go get another job. I can run backhoes. I have these other skills. But like risk, like I see people in other countries and they have to walk 8 or 9 miles to go get water and walk back and hope that rebels don't show up with machine guns and kill them or rape them or like our risk in our country is so much less than a lot of other people deal with. Like, I was just in Costa Rica and like we take such for granted clean water and toilets and, you know, refrigeration. And it's like, our risk really isn't that much risk. Like, you're going to lose some money or fail and have to start over. Like, ultimately you're all going to die anyway.
Yeah.
Between now and when you die, why don't you like try to do something? Mm-hmm. Like, chase it. Who cares? I mean, chase the risk. I mean, I think people should be careful about how much debt they take on when they do that. That's why I think it's also smart to partner with people. If someone has some of that money, that they can back you and give them half your company. Like, give them 40% of your company. Brandon didn't back me financially, but he did with his mind. Skill. Like, if our company becomes huge someday, how much money do I need anyway? Who cares if he has 40%?
Yep. Yeah. And it was a lot more economical to do that instead of paying cash for all that work that needed to be done. And he has skin in the game, and so he has more incentive to do a really good job and put like his full heart in it.
Well, and also people, I think, want things to happen. I mean, granted, MKC happened fast, but I didn't know it at the time how it would go. But like, okay, if you want to build a cooler company, like, you're not going to try to create Yeti overnight. If you are, you're going to have to take on tons of debt and tons of risk, and you're going to make all these mistakes because you don't know how to run a cooler company. Why don't you make 10 coolers and sell them?
Mm-hmm.
And then make 15 and figure out, oh, my latches suck, and fix your latches. We figured out our sheaths sucked and fix those. And like, instead of going and like investing in molds and making 200,000 coolers, you also have to be able to sell them.
Yep.
You know, so I think people need to be willing to start small and be patient. Like, it's not an overnight. It's funny. Somebody referred to Montana Knife Company as a 30-year overnight success story. You know,
Yeah.
There was
It's
a lot
longer than that.
There was a lot of planning, a lot of my reputation helped build Montana Knife Company right from the ground. But if I didn't have that, it would have been much tougher.
Mm-hmm.
There was some credibility behind that, you know.
I do wish people talked about this stuff more, though, because there is a predominant trend now in like younger entrepreneurs to raise lots of money and experiment on ideas, whether that's a product idea or a tech idea. And for me, my story is similar to yours in that I was a very blue collar Billings kid, and I had to clean. My dad dropped me off at the horse trainer so I could clean stalls when I was 12, 13, and 14, because that's when he expected us to start working. And so when Mountain Tough was starting, the last thing I ever wanted to do in the world was touch a single penny of debt. And that was just kind of how we were raised, is like, if you can't do it with your own money, you don't do it. And if you need more money, you go make it somewhere else and inject it into the business. And that mindset has pros and cons when starting a company.
Yeah.
But the pro of it for me with Mountain Tough that I love was your only way to generate cash is to produce something that a customer will buy. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a bunch of cash that you borrowed to get your business off the ground, then you're guessing what the customer wants and what the customer expects out of your product. But in a cash-strapped startup where you are bootstrapping it, you're really tuned in with exactly what the customer wants, because it has to work. It has to work.
Is Mountain Tough today exactly what you envisioned on day one?
No.
Right.
Yeah, there's been a lot of evolutions.
Right.
Evolutions that the customer has taken us through. Right. Which
the customer, or also just the realities of running business, of like, oh, I thought I could do this and you can't do that, or that doesn't work, or but the customer, that's the big thing. The customer helping tell you what your business, what they want and what they need, what's missing in the market. Like the whole raising funds thing, if you'd have raised a bunch of money for this gym idea, most super rich guys with some money to invest in a gym would be sitting there imagining, a Planet Fitness or a whatever big gym brands are out there. And if you'd have come to them a few years ago and been like, I want to close down the public part of my gym and just film videos in a different building that's bigger than the one we're in, a business guide that's not what gyms normally look like. Or if you would have said, I want to borrow $3 million to start this company and I'm going to focus on hunters and hikers, and I've heard this from people with money when we were starting. It was like, well, but how many people out there hunt? And it's like, well, it's a tiny percentage of the American public, right? Like, that's a tiny market. Why don't you get into a different market? And it's like, because this is what I know.
Yeah.
And you are helping train people that are just like you. Like when I was a lineman, and I'm talking to all my buddies, like I know what they're looking for because I'm one of them.
Yeah.
If you would allowed investors, because they only know what they know, they've only known what they've seen, may or may not have walked in a few gyms, they'd be trying to tell you what you could and couldn't do with your money and your business plan, your strategy, from day one.
Yeah, and they either don't catch on to your vision or they want to take your vision closer to their vision.
Right.
Which leads you down some different paths.
And it is smart. Like early on, this guy just cold called me out of the blue, and he's a business guy and invests in a ton of companies and whatnot. We were tiny. I mean, I had one employee. I was in my 2-car garage, and I talked with him a couple hours on the phone, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to drive down and meet you." And he was from Whitefish, but big business guy. And he wanted to invest, and we were like, "No, I don't need money. I need help. I need know-how. Like I need, because even if I told him then, if you gave me $1 million today, I could buy a ton more steel, but like, I don't know how to turn that into knives. I don't know how to sell it. I don't know yet what this all looks like. I'm still learning how to build this machine. Now, if you'd have said, I'm going to give you $1 million and 20 employees from another knife company, and they're just going to build it all, okay, that kind of starts to make sense. But like, I didn't want his money because I didn't know what I would do with it. I didn't know how. I wanted to have, and I didn't want the pressure from someone going like, "What are you doing? This isn't working how you said it was going to." But one thing I will say, he kept talking to us and just kept being a sounding board. And it also was very advantageous to have someone who had been in big business that you could actually call and ask some questions like business stuff. And that's one thing I tell people that are wanting to start a company. Like, eventually we let that guy invest a little bit in a really small way, because I asked him to be on our board of directors because we started realizing, God, there's so much more to business
knowledge,
than just making knives. And he's like, "Well, if I'm going to be involved, I want a little piece, less than 5%."
Yeah.
But I tell people, man, don't be afraid to just admit what you don't know and seek advice. Like, don't be afraid to ask business people how they got where they got, and pick the parts and pieces out that actually apply to your own business. Not everything, like the way that Burger King is run doesn't necessarily equate to Mountain Tough, but like some of it might. You might actually be surprised.
Yeah, that wisdom and knowledge in like business acumen is so valuable. It's been the same for me, that there's some extra complicated layers of business that if you don't spend time in them a lot, there's so much that we don't know, and just allowing some of those advisors to pass on that experience has been huge.
Well, like the borrowing money thing, like we're breaking that rule now, because like now we're at a place, and I have a controller who is kind of like a CFO. He was an accountant for 20 years. Like, now I have expert advice. When I go borrow money, it's with advice and with a strategy and a plan, where day one, if I would have borrowed money, I wouldn't have understood how to really apply it well and track things. And like, sometimes it is better off for you to keep your cash in your bank account for a rainy day and borrow some money and pay a little interest. Like, that can, so it's like, I don't want people to think that borrowing money also is a bad thing. But I just think in those super early stages, when you still have a day job, like, man, just try to figure out how to work more hours, how to use your network. Don't be afraid to partner up with somebody you think's really smart, and like save that cash. But that's the one thing when it comes to discipline. I have these people say, like, I get these really nice messages about how motivating what we've done is. A lot of people have watched from day one, because I had an Instagram, somewhat of a following on my Josh Smith Knives stuff. So a lot of people have seen it from day one. And I'll get messages like, "It's so inspirational. I want to quit my job and chase my dream of what I'm doing." And I get people that actually ask advice, and I'll have some conversations, and I'll be like, "Well, where are you at on it right now? Like, on this dream, what have you done?" "Well, nothing. I got to quit my job because," it's like, no, dude.
No.
No, like get up earlier.
Nights and weekends, yeah.
Like, maybe you don't go to the bar on Friday night. Maybe you go to bed at 8:30 and you wake up at 4 a.m. and you work for 5 hours before your children wake up.
Yep.
Like, maybe you skip the football game and you work all day Saturday instead of going to the football game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, there has to be some sacrifice. You know, has to be sacrifice.
Oh, it's such a great way to get like a dream business off the ground too, because you have your full-time job and you're building your passion behind the scenes, and you can get it to a level where those early adopter customers buy your new entrepreneurship venture, but by you building it behind the scenes, you have the security of that full-time job.
Right.
But you also have time to get proof of concepts out there to where you see enough light that you're like, this thing is going to work. I'm going to take this leap and go full time.
For sure.
I think like there is a lot to unpack in your story around timing and mastering your craft. I think so much of entrepreneurship is about timing, and it is also about mastering your craft. But the thing that really stood out to me today, before we started recording in the studio, we were talking about just how there tends to be a lot of people struggling, and they're struggling with complacency, passivity, depression, anxiety. They're kind of down. And the one thing that really stood out in your story is, I think if we think about like our friends and family members around us, and these friends or people we don't know calling about getting things off the ground. And sometimes those things aren't businesses. Sometimes they're going on their first hunt or running their first marathon, or sometimes it's family stuff. I think your story does highlight how important it is to have a couple people around us that just say they believe in us.
Yep.
Like your wife saying she believes in you and proving that with some support really was kind of what seemed to light the final fire to get Montanan Knife Company built.
Yeah, between her and that group of people at Winter Strong, you know, it's like maybe some people don't need, maybe some people are just mentally strong enough they don't need support. But I would tend to argue that I bet you they have support, that maybe they're just not given the credit where it's due. But like that support, having a spouse that supports you, a family that supports you, is huge. Like if you're going to go off and you're going to take a risk, like, man, you got to have your ducks squared away at home. And you also have to provide enough security for them that they don't think you're being reckless with your future. Like, you know, these were a lot of conversations, and a lot of it was like, well, I have other skills. Like if this doesn't work, I'm not going to bankrupt us to where we're going to lose our home. Like, you know, I'm also going to be willing to admit failure and bail out and go take another job or do whatever before like we lose our home. I think if your spouse knows that you're aware and you're cognizant of that and you're honest with yourself, which is all the more reason to wait to quit that job until you have you've done something. You know, the whole getting up early and working thing. My dad would always preach to me as a kid, time management. Like he would always tell me, if you get up and work 2 hours before school every single day of the year, for example, what's 365 hours times 2? I mean, you're talking 750 hours or whatever. I mean, man, you apply 750 hours to anything in a year, in 1 year. That doesn't count your hour or two at night. Okay, well, 2 hours at night, it's 1,500 hours.
Jeez. Yeah.
In 1 year, it's 2,080 hours in a work week, in a work year.
Yeah.
And you only have to work 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours at night. But if you did it every day after your kids go to sleep at night, you put down your little kids at 8 p.m. or whatever, and you go work until 10, 8 to 10, 4 to 6, 5 to 7, every single day, 1,500 hours. You're 500 hours short of a work year, and that's if you don't work an occasional 8-hour Saturday and Sunday.
Jeez.
You know, or a paid vacation day. You get Memorial Day off, and you work it. Like, don't tell me you don't have time. And I'm a hypocrite. Like it's the same way with like being out of shape right now. It's excuses about time. It's I am busy, it's time, but it's just because it hasn't been prioritized.
Yeah, time management.
I've made a little bit of that change just here recently, but like I'm not going to sit here and say I don't have the time. I've just decided to put my time into other stuff, you know. That being said, you got to be careful with your relationship about being so crazy into it that you don't take maybe one night and take your wife to dinner. You know, like dedicating one night a week to making sure your relationship's good, or knocking off and go to your kid's basketball game or something. I mean, you know, there has to be balance. But you don't have to quit your job. You can literally work almost 2,000 more hours. And if it's your passion, you should be enjoying it.
Yeah, be craving it.
Yep.
Flipping the coin, what do you think has been the hardest stuff you've gone through with this rapid growth since 2020?
Just questioning myself, just because like I don't know, I'm not a business guy. I'm a lineman, a backhoe operator, knife maker, hunter. So like questioning what the next moves are. You know, I do ask a lot of questions. I think I've done, I don't know what it is, but I think I've done a really good job of putting really good people around me. Andrew, our director of operations, came from Amazon. He's phenomenal. I think maybe being a person that these people can buy into, that they know you're serious, they know you're dedicated, so they'll follow that. And finding like-minded people. Brandon's motivated. Andrew's motivated. Jason, my finance guy that just started last year, is motivated. Like, when people send me resumes, I don't read them. I go to their Instagram page, like, what do you do on Saturday morning? Do you get up and go for a hike? Do you go fishing? Do you take your dog somewhere? Do you take your family out? Like if I see someone active on the weekend doing stuff after work, shed hunting, whatever.
Yeah.
I tell my employees all the time, if you get up and do something, that's all I care about. That tells me you're the kind of person that I can be around. Like you're motivated. I hate being hungover after like drinking too much because it's the feeling, whatever, but it's the missing of the next day.
Oh, you kill a Saturday.
Yeah, I hate, like I'm not a big drinker.
Yeah.
Big part of it is like if I waste time, drives me insane. But my biggest challenge has just been the questioning of my own abilities to be the quote unquote CEO. You know, we go through a financial document and the financial people are all, you know, the board of directors, and they're all talking about the balance sheet and the EBITDA and all this shit. And I'm just like, I'm such a fraud. Like, why am I the boss?
Yeah.
But it's not my job to know everything. And that's the thing. It's my job to find the right people and to be someone they want to follow, but then also be willing to empower them to make decisions. Like when I walked in here, came upstairs, you had like 6 people in there.
Yeah.
I'm guessing whatever they do, you're not as good at what they do as them.
For sure.
You have them here for a reason. You've empowered them to do their job for a reason.
Yeah.
I think that comes with age. Like you hit a certain time in life where maybe there's a little less ego and you realize you're not the smartest person in the room, you know, and you're willing to, you know, delegate.
I think you get to an age where if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Yeah. And I think you also, once you realize you're not great at something and you find a person that is great at that and much better than you, and hand that off to them,
Mm-hmm.
when you see the releasing, freeing, and powerful impact that does make, I think it makes it obvious to see where you can do that again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I remember that in the early days of Mountain Tough, holding on a little too tight to like the finance side of our business.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally did hand that off to a CFO, it was like the best thing that I ever did. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, in terms of like time management, I had 20 more hours back a week to work on stuff that I was much better at.
Yep.
So I think once you see it happen once, it becomes so much easier to do again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also as a business owner, rewarding those people, like we pay well. Andrew told us when he came over from Amazon, hiring will be the most expensive thing that you do. The time invested in finding those people, interviewing, going through all that, and then all the training to get them to understand your business, your vision. And then if you lose that person, you have to do it again. God, that's taking your time. Like that's expensive. It's I'm a huge advocate of culture and people. We will teach you the skills you need to know. I mean, there's certain jobs. You hire an engineer. I'm not teaching an engineer anything, but like culture-wise, the way they work, the effort they put in, how they interact with our other employees, stuff's critical, man. Like, I think customers feel it, they see it. Like, I think it makes a real big difference in your company.
Yeah.
It's funny, the bigger our company gets, the more inadequate I feel, just because like now I have engineers working for me, I have CNC programmers working for me, I have financial people working for me, operations people. And it's like, but I think what is helpful is then like, there's this project we're working on I can't really talk about because you're going to see it on TV, but a project pops up and someone calls me and they're like, I need a knife forged for this. Like I can go out and forge a badass blade in 2 days and make a couple knives and test one and have it all work really, really well. And I can make the thing.
Yeah.
And I think that does help get respect back of like, well, he can't, not an engineer and he can't do this, this, and this, but like
he can knock that out.
He can go make a knife by hand and like, and also I think people see I'm out there on Saturdays reorganizing, moving shelving, putting shelving together, cleaning the floor, doing whatever. I think they see I'm not above doing anything in the shop.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNPOD to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. It's been a hard transition for me too, because like the bigger your team gets with some brilliant people on that team, it's kind of like you don't work on the same stuff you used to work on.
Right.
And so then you feel like your job has changed in figuring out what to do with that unlock of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is the way it's supposed to be, because you're supposed to be watching the future and the vision and, you know, where MKC is headed. And if you're
you're the lighthouse of your brand. I'm the lighthouse of our brand. So it's whether it's bringing other brand partners in,
mm-hmm.
attracting other talent to come work there, go out and do podcasts, or you become kind of the face of it, and you almost feel a little fraudulent, like, you know, you're not the guy necessarily working out in all the videos, or you're not the guy on the CNC machine, but you're doing things that, like, when someone wants to work with Mountain Tough as a partner or whatever, they want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're the owner, you're the guy that started it. And it's an interesting, mentally, it's like a little strange. But I think what makes our company different, what you're doing different from like a huge corporate gym, is like, but the CEO can still go do the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that, I think customers really appreciate when they see a CEO or the owner, like, you can go in the gym and do what anybody else can do. You know, I can walk downstairs and, you know, I can do,
knife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can go hunt and do the thing, you know.
The authenticity.
Yeah, the authenticity thing, I think customers are smarter than they've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
They see through bullshit on social media, you know, and YouTube and fake content. And, man, I remember, you know, lineman buddies commenting on hunting content, being like, every bit of that's posed. Like,
people know. Yeah.
They know. They're smart.
And a big part of authenticity for you has been building in Montana and creating Montana jobs
Mm-hmm.
as well.
It's not just Montana, because like we still don't do everything in house. That's the other thing for entrepreneurs. Like, if you're starting a business, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do everything like right off the bat. Like, I couldn't. When you still want to start Mountain Tough, you worked out in a park. You didn't have this.
Yep.
Right. So, you know, there's certain big machines and big processes that take a lot of capital and a lot of room. And those are goals that we're eating that elephant one bite at a time. And we're bringing processes in. So we're not only hiring people in Montana, but like around the country, you know, buying our steel that's being made in New York and cutting it in New York and having shit shipped across the country and being done over here, or buying screws that are being made up in Whitefish, Montana. But I am super proud of creating American jobs. And then especially in Montana, manufacturing is not a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Around Missoula, it's a real service industry. Not a lot of professional jobs really, and or manufacturing jobs. And so the fact that in our little town, when I moved there in Frenchtown, they had a huge paper mill that shut down. There was a logging plywood mill out in Bonner, Montana, that shut down. The mill in Seeley Lake, which is still Missoula County, Pyramid Lumber, just announced last week it's shutting down.
Man.
You know, these huge industries, the company that makes chipboard in Missoula, huge company, they announced last week they're shutting down. They're taking their operations to Oregon or somewhere. So for us to be bringing jobs to our town, and the fact that we're in the school district that educated my kids, and our tax dollars are going to our actual high school right there. And I see my employees out on the weekend wearing one of our hoodies, going to their kids' basketball game, or
it's awesome.
That's the thing. The dollars that you create in your community, the dollars we bring in, get spent all over that community over and over again. And I don't know the statistics. I've been going to actually try to do some research on this, but 95% of our business will be done out of state. We're one of the few businesses that are bringing revenue into our state. You know, a lot of small local businesses, they're needed, they're crucial, but they count on the locals to support them. And that's hard on a small community.
Yeah.
Because you're asking your neighbors to spend their dollars on you, and you're not necessarily influxing cash into your economy, where that's what we're doing. It's pretty damn cool.
That is super cool.
You know.
Didn't you guys potentially create a post office expansion there too?
Well, they've talked about it, because we're by far now the largest postal customer. When our building is done in the next couple of years that we're moving into, it'll be still in Frenchtown School District, but it'll be through a different post office. So it's actually one of those weird things. The lady at the post office is like super bummed out about it, because we're making her look amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Her numbers are through the roof. And she was like, God, I was hoping they were going to build me a new post office before you guys move. You know, it's just a small little tiny post office. But, yeah, the effects that, and that's the thing, when people buy an American made product and it's a little bit more expensive, man, your dollars are going into a community somewhere it matters. Like we need thousands more, you know, Montana knife companies or whatever spread throughout the country. Maybe they don't even get as big as us, but like those dollars that you guys are spending, that's a little bit more money than the Chinese knockoff. Those are the dollars going into your community.
Yeah.
You know?
It's so true and so powerful, because all of those people that you're employing, you know, have their family there, and a lot of them have families, a lot of them have kids. And so the ripple down effects of what one business can do is pretty astonishing.
It's amazing. And they're all paying property tax. They're all paying income tax. They're all contributing. They're buying groceries locally, and they're spending their dollars on motorcycles and going camping, and they're spending their dollars in the local economy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not going to some corporate office somewhere. You know, it's not Home Depot and all the revenue's going to Atlanta, you know, and there's a couple manager jobs and then a bunch of lower paying entry level jobs. You know, I don't know, it's pretty cool. And it's cool seeing, I'm a big proponent of like bringing people up through the company, like Tristan, when he started and where he is now and where he will be someday. I'm a big proponent of, it takes time. Like Andrew spends a lot of time training Tristan and Melissa, but it also gives them, they're going to treat that more like their business if they know there's a path up for them, you know.
Well, and they know the business inside and out that way.
And they're core end users. When people go follow that's another reason I look at people's Instagram before I hire them. A lot of our customers follow our employees. Well, if they see Tristan, he, killed an elk last year in a terrible shithole and packed it out. And he's constantly, a bunch of our employees they all go to the gym together. They work out together. They hunt together. They shoot bows at the shop together.
Yeah.
And when I follow a company, that's what I always thought was cool about Stone Glacier. You could go just click on one of their employees tagged, be like, damn, like every one of those dudes, like they hunt, they're hardcore, they're legit.
They're living the life.
They are. And that's what I love seeing our employees. I mean, Stone Glacier was a really great example of that before I ever had MKC is, whether Andrew Whitney or whoever, Kurt Roscoe that started it grew up 2 miles from where I live right now. I mean, and his dad was a badass.
Yeah.
Hardworking people, but they're legit,
Yeah, it does help so much with the brand, people living that life know how to enhance the product too, to make it better because they're using it all the time. And then just the culture of like, these are people I want to hang out with, even if we weren't working together, is a game changer.
And it's such a cool vibe in the shop. You know, like I'm a huge proponent of hiring young, like everyone wants to denigrate young people. Oh, they're lazy. They all just want to play video games. And it's like, man, I would way rather take a young person that's super excited about being in the hunt industry and just super like full of life and goals than a 50-year-old guy that's a curmudgeon because he's been stuck at a job forever and he's been beaten down by the system. And you walk in our shop and it's like all these young, good-looking dudes and girls.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not what I mean, people all the time like, this is not what I expected. Like, I thought I was going to see a bunch of ugly old fat guys, you know,
sharpening knives,
smoking cigarettes and cussing at each other. And it's like, this is a cool group of people.
Yeah.
Just great humans, you know.
Yeah, I felt that when I visited you for sure.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
They all want us to put a gym in our new building when we build it. So we're trying to figure that out. Just, again, that culture piece.
Yeah.
You know, that working out together, and a lot of them work out together right now just in gyms in town. But
oh yeah, where's the new building going to be?
Right at the exit. If you go to Glacier Park, exit 93, on Highway 90, going up 93 to go to Glacier. We're going to be right on the interstate. You'll see us right. Like if you were driving from Bozeman to Washington,
you'll see it.
You'll see it big time.
And when will you be in there? A couple of years.
Hopefully at the end of next year.
Okay.
Yeah, I just met with the county yesterday for the first time. We're going to close on the land here in about 40 days. Just all the permitting, and it's going to be a slow process, but
that's going to be cool. Though.
Yeah.
Especially seeing it from the interstate.
Yeah. It'll be really cool. It's pretty exciting. Our building right now is about 10,000 square feet, and this one will be around 40, 45.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Life's crazy. I mean, hearing your story is just, life is crazy. You never know where it's going to take anyone, like twists and turns and events and good and bad, but like resilience and just getting up if you get knocked down also is pretty relevant in your story.
Yeah, I think shutting the TV off, I tell my kids all the time, you have to make life happen. Don't let life happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, make really lucky people, like, you create your luck. What's that quote? The harder I work, the luckier I get. And the luckier I get, the harder I work. It's just funny about that with luck. Like, yeah, my kid's tall. He got lucky he's tall, but then you apply work to luck and you get really great results, you know? As much luck as you have, you're also going to, and I'm sure you've had it, you have stuff that's unlucky, but you don't come on a podcast and just talk about everything that went wrong.
Yeah.
Because I also don't dwell on the stuff that went wrong. Like that's a mindset thing too, of like celebrate and like, if something goes wrong, forget it and move on. That's how I parented my kids all the time. Like, I would definitely crack the hammer and come down hard. And that's how I am with employees if it's needed, but then it's like instantly over and we're looking ahead. And to me, that's also things with like when things go wrong, like deal with it. And then like we're looking to tomorrow.
Don't look in the past.
Don't look in the past. And
yeah,
that's the news on TV, the amount of time people, I guarantee you most people that want to chase the American dream and start their own business watch more hours of TV a week than they work on their business.
For sure. Yeah.
I listen to nothing but podcasts. I try to listen to successful people, podcast, motivation. I listen to a ton of like Andy Frisella and the First Forum podcast because he had that MFCO podcast like when I started in 2020. I listen to podcasts. I'll watch videos, how to something. I'll read like, I can't stand turning the TV on and watching the news except for just a little bit to be aware. But, you can only control what's right around you in your community. Who cares what's going on in the rest of the world? And
yeah, I mean, and like the Stoic philosophies too. I mean, it's so connected in there. Like the number one principle of a lot of like the Stoic literature is just control what you can.
yeah,
And don't worry about anything else. And as soon as you make that shift, then whatever's on the news really doesn't matter that much or impact your life.
yeah. If you got 15 minutes free on the toilet, research something.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, that's what I'm constantly Googling and looking up and trying to find, or just listening to a podcast like this. Like, I think accomplished people are amazing. Like, I love to hear. I think that's what was so big about Winter Strong is when you're in a small community, you're surrounded by everyone. As much as I love people in our community, most everyone's kind of trying to do the same thing. They're going to their job, bitching about their job. They're chasing their kids and they're doing their best that they can. But most people aren't really trying to step out and do something different. And so if you can't go to a place like Winter Strong, I mean, I was fortunate with that, but you can fill your ears with that stuff all day long. When I was a lineman, in 2020 still, I listened to podcasts every day, like all the time, just for that motivation and that, not just motivation, but like that feeling that like it is possible. You know, Evan Hafer started Black Rifle Coffee and he was just a dummy from a logging town in Idaho that went to the military.
Yeah.
Like, why can he have a successful coffee company and I can't build a knife company? I know knives, he knows coffee. And I would argue that he didn't even know coffee that well in the beginning. He figured it out. He learned it.
Yeah, he had a vision.
He loved coffee. He had a passion for it, but he didn't know much about it. So why can't, if he builds a public company, like why can't I? You know,
what a gift and a resource too. I mean, no other time in history could you just absorb all this knowledge all day long through podcasts, and to not utilize that gift is just kind of a tragedy, because you could learn about anything you want from very accomplished people now on any subject.
Even with an algorithm, like on social media, you know, people complain about algorithms, and I agree with some of it, but also you can use those algorithms to your advantage. Like, if all you follow is motivational quotes and successful business people, you know, and people in the industry that you are interested in, or workout fitness people. For the longest time, I would send my daughters, like Claire P. Thomas. I would send them, like, you can be on Instagram and be in a bikini and be a total hoe, or you can be in a bikini and showing off and talking about how much hard work you put in to get the body you got. And so I'd send my daughters posts from people like Claire P. Thomas and other workout girls that, like, look, she's gorgeous, she's beautiful, but she also talks about how she got there, and she's doing it in a very respectful way, respectful to her own body and herself. But like, yeah, she looks amazing in a bikini because she worked her ass off for it. And she also was a Division I track athlete. And so I would always point my kids to like those kind of successful people.
The work ethic.
Yeah, because I like the posts that she writes, you know, and like she talks about the work ethic. She talks about mental struggle and that it wasn't always easy, and the consistency to stay at that level, you know. So your feed can be curated to however you want it to be. If all you follow are dumb jokes, then fine, you're going to get a lot of dumb jokes thrown at you. Or if all you follow is, you know, negativity and a bunch of political crap that both parties are sending you, you're going to be just reading, you're going to be absorbing negativity all day long.
Yeah, you got to filter your mind and decide what you're going to let in there and not.
Yep.
That stuff is so powerful.
I unfollow friends I still really, really like. I just don't want to hear about the negativity. You know, I don't want it in my feed, you know.
Yeah, that stuff is
because we live in the greatest country on earth. We have access to everything that you could ever want, more information than you could ever want. yeah, there's things about our society that aren't great, but like I can't control that stuff. I'm hoping I'm making our community a little bit better. I know you're hoping that you're making your community better, and the people you're helping through, you know, your fitness journey and your apps, and you know, people. I think there's no easier time than now for people to chase the American dream. I mean, shit, my great grandfather didn't have power.
Yeah,
I asked my grandmother before she passed away what the greatest invention that changed her life the most was, and she said a telephone. Like, you don't talk about hard.
Yeah.
You know, coming out across our country in a horse and a buggy. You think today is super unfair. Like, those people were going with nothing. I mean, they walked across the country with a shovel to start a gold mine in some canyon in, you know, around Bozeman. Like, that was their American dream. I just pick a spot, I'm gonna start digging here. You know,
it's insane. I mean, because they had no ability to learn quickly stuff they needed to learn from experienced people, where
they had myth and legend and stories.
Yeah, you're on the wagon in the middle of Montana. You can't Google an article on like drilling a well.
No, you happen across a trapper and he says, there's this creek up off of the Missouri, 4 days ride from here that's got a ton of gold, and you decide that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
He might be totally full of shit. drunk off some alcohol he made.
Yeah.
So you look at today, we have access to all this knowledge and resources to reach out and touch people. When I was in junior high making knives, I got letters from a couple people in Europe. We had to write letters back and forth for months to figure out a knife order. And now we can just message
seconds
everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So I just don't buy people's idea that it's like harder today, or it's always hard,
Mm-hmm.
And
you don't want it to be easy either. I mean, it being hard is the beauty. I mean, it wouldn't be joyful if there wasn't some suffering, and it's the same with backcountry hunting. Like, easy hunts aren't really that memorable or that enjoyable compared to the very, very difficult ones.
Yeah, you don't ever see a grown man cry after he shoots a whitetail out of his truck window.
Mm-hmm.
But you will see him cry after he shoots an elk after 4 days of busting his ass in the wilderness.
Yep. Or 10 years of trying with his bow, or
yeah.
I've
come to Montana 7 years in a row and never shot an animal, and I finally did it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the struggle. You need the failure and the struggle. That's the thing too. When you fail in your own business, like, it's just going to make the successes feel better. You can't have the pleasure without the pain.
Yeah, the highs and lows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for swinging by. It was awesome to see you, and proud of you, and you guys are doing amazing things.
Well, I appreciate it. You guys have been, we've been kind of on this trajectory together, and floated around in each other's networks, kind of bumping into each other a bit, and it's been super cool to see your evolution. I remember going and knocking on the Stone Glacier guy's door back when you were over in Bozeman in that small little spot, and met a photographer, walked into your gym over there and that little space, and it's just been cool to see your guys' evolution, and then seeing your brand out and about throughout the country now. It's just, I don't know, I think there's a lot of similarities in what we're doing, which is really cool. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Hearing your story today, it does remind me so much of our story, and I think it is a lot of that. It's just the brick by brick. It is the grain of sand. You just keep plugging away every day and keep doing your best and working hard, and amazing things happen. But they're not going to happen if you're not putting yourself out there for them too. And
right.
You could hear that a lot in your journey, and that's how the Mountain Tough journey's been also.
Yeah, it's just that life of kind of pursuing a passion, Definitely doesn't happen overnight, but if you're doing it because you enjoy it, then, and also as far as the measurement of success, like it doesn't necessarily mean you have to become a millionaire, or like if it always stays your part-time thing at night and you do it more when you retire someday, like, I think if people are passionate in doing what they love to do, like who cares how big or how famous you get from it if that's what you love doing.
For sure. Yeah.
I do want to apologize in advance for beating you at the SIG art games this summer. But,
I don't know, man. Our team is pretty stacked.
Who's on your team?
So I got Bert, which is going to be awesome.
Bert's never really shot much stuff though, like a gun or bow much. So I don't know. Bert's probably your weak link.
He's been training up. He's pumped. He's super excited.
He's awesome.
Like he's super competitive. So he's just been on fire.
No, he's a badass.
And then I got Kevin Miller. Kevin played for the Boston Bruins.
Oh, really?
He was a defenseman for the Bruins and retired a few years ago.
So is his job just to be the enforcer?
He's our enforcer.
He's going to go around just beat up other people's teammates?
Yeah. He's actually not going to shoot. He's just going to fight with other teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those hockey guys. I've never played hockey. Like where I grew up, it was never an option.
Mm-hmm.
But god dang, I wish it had been. Like hockey is freaking cool.
It is cool.
Those guys are unbelievable.
It's a cool sport.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well, I always try to explain to my wife the fighting thing. She just doesn't get it. And I'm just like, it's such a necessary part of the sport. It's just, it's why you don't see a lot of punk ass stuff happening on the ice, because like they're going to handle it.
Yeah.
And you take a cheap shot, you better have eyes in the back of your head.
There's some, they have some strong dudes too. Those guys are awesome. Yeah. Who's on your team?
Bo Nickel, so he's going to go up against your hockey guy. He's my enforcer.
Oh, man.
He's probably a lot smaller than your dude, but I'll take my chances with Bo. Bo Nickel, the UFC fighter, and Tulsi Gabbard.
Dang.
And she actually just did the tactical games, which is super cool, and took second.
Jeez.
Yeah, she's a badass.
She's a beast, yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome. So, and just such a nice person. Like, God, I hope Trump picks her as a running mate, because I think she's very level-headed, kind of down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she would be somebody to like sell our country out, or I just think she's principled, and
yeah,
you're never going to agree with everything that everybody says, but man, she's a cool gal.
That's gonna be a cool team.
It will be. I'm super fortunate that they said yes. But Bo, he fights in UFC 300 here in just a couple weeks, and then he's going straight from there to a brown bear hunt up in Alaska. So,
dang.
Honestly, I'm not sure if we're even going to get much time, if at all, to get together to train.
Mm-hmm.
But Tulsi, running for potentially vice president of the world.
Yeah,
she's got a tough schedule, so
her schedule's gonna be nuts.
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out. I asked her, I was like, what's it like knowing that at some point here in the next few months you're going to get a phone call, and it's either going to be like, go home to Hawaii, grab your bikini and go surf, and like nobody cares,
mm-hmm.
or you're going to be one heartbeat away from potentially running the free world. Like, it's such a crazy dichotomy of circumstances of like, if he doesn't choose you, no one will care, and everyone will generally still like you, and you'll just go off and do your thing and be Tulsi. Or half the world will just instantly overnight hate you for no reason, and you're going to be running for vice president and like to an 80-year-old.
Talk about the shift. Yeah. Talk about the two different life paths that could happen with one phone call.
Yeah.
That is nuts.
It doesn't get more like
drastic,
divergent than that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's crazy.
But she was just like, she's just so chill, and she's just like, you know what, either way I'll be happy. She's like, I'll be if I get to go surf and hang out with my family, then that's fine. But she really wants the ability to like contribute and help our country, which I believe her when she says it. So
yeah,
she's a cool gal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to do some training together, I know I talked to the SIG crew a little bit, the SIG staff, and I know some of the East Coast guys, like Bert is going to train with Daniel Horner,
Mm-hmm.
and Daniel Horner is going to kind of fly out and make sure to do a day of training with the East Coast crew.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know for especially people in Montana, Peter Howell's going to do a lot of the training,
Mm-hmm.
and Peter's amazing, and he lives just, right down the road.
Yep.
So if you ever want to link up, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we might do that because even if, Tulsi's, we're going to try and figure it out with Tulsi. Like, and even if I got to fly out somewhere, if she's on the East Coast somewhere and we just got to meet her for a half a day, like I'll make it work around her schedule. Hers is, a little more important than mine.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, it'd be fun to come over here and go meet up with Peter and do some training with him and mess around. It'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
He's got a beautiful place up there.
Yeah, it's an awesome place.
Yeah, those SIG guys are just, Peter's just the nicest dang guy.
Yeah.
Super cool. He sent me a picture of a knife and his gal with a fish the other day. It was pretty cool. Big old fish. They were out fishing somewhere.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's like a man of mystery. He's always like guiding, shooting, hunting, fishing.
Mm-hmm.
You're never sure where he is.
Right.
But he's salt of the earth.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Well, cool.
Well, thanks, Josh. Appreciate it, and we'll see you soon for the ARC.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. What a phenomenal conversation with Josh. What just a good, authentic human being. You can hear in his story and how he speaks, his authenticity. He's a good dude that lives the life, and you can tell his work ethic and his mastering of his craft eventually led to Montana Knife Company. But as you heard on today's episode, it did not happen fast for Josh. There was a lot of patience in that story. There was a lot of ups and downs. There was a lot of overcoming adversity. And there was a lot of timing. Sometimes starting a brand, starting a business, or pursuing a passion in life, there are different seasons in life and different timing opportunities open up where it is time to execute on something. And that was the eye-opening thing to me listening to Josh today, was that support he got from his wife right around that COVID year. That's what led to this 30-plus year journey to get a company off the ground. Once that happened, it was like pouring gas on a fire. They are one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing company in Montana. They've had explosive growth in the last couple of years, but it has definitely been a 30-plus year journey. You've heard that in his story. So I encourage you guys, the golden nugget from today is don't quit. Do not quit on your passion. If it's your passion, continue to work on it. Work on it in the morning. Work on it in the evenings. Work on it on the weekends. Don't quit. You never know when that door is going to open. That opportunity is going to connect with the perfect timing to create that perfect storm. That was a good example of that today from Josh. Thanks so much for being here. We love you guys. If you want to learn more about Montana Knife Company, check them out on Instagram at Montana Knife Company. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We'll see you next week.